filmmaker in linear narrative storytelling that has sort of evolved into. And then I like playing around in sort of online spaces, audience building, and all that, and all in the service of telling stories and just generally goofing off and having a good online. That's I think probably the most accurate summation of who I am.
Okay, cool. And then in that case, may I say a few things about you?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So I met Freddie when he was a student at University of Southern California. I was his professor in a course in web video when there wasn't a thing called web video. YouTube hadn't even started yet. This was 2004, I believe, and YouTube didn't launch till about 2006. So it's pretty crazy. But I think both of us knew that there was going to be something like YouTube. And so you were making these videos that were kind of YouTube-ish. And the first ones that I remember that you were doing were kind of experimental. Is that right?
Yeah, so at that time it was I think it was like for a little bit, the only thing that you could do once you made a video was you would have to find hosting for it. It was like a big question of like, where would you host your video? And like a lot of the early stuff when I was messing around in like freshman year, which would be 2004, we would like USC gave everyone like, what was it, like 50 megabytes of web space. So, we would like, I remember like encoding stuff and like putting it on a little page on the USC web server that they gave to all like their students, like the student web server space. So yeah, it was just kind of like using whatever cameras whoever was in the film program had brought along. So it wasn't any of the like stuff that like the school had. It was all just people's like personal cameras, and it became a thing where like certain people were like, oh, so and so had like the DVX 100, so I got to borrow that. And yeah, it was just making just anything and everything. It was at that time I remember just little jokey shorts. One thing that happened every year that was a lot of fun was they did a 24-hour film contest that I think I did every year I was there. So just like basically just very experimental, just amusing ourselves more than anything else, and just like trying things out and just playing around with cameras. And yeah, that was sort of the outside the classwork. That was a lot of the time when I was at USC. That's what we were doing.
So you were still in school, playing around, which is what you should be doing in school, experimenting, because you were kind of majoring in experimental video. And then you started playing around with Guitar Hero. What was that about?
Yeah, so Guitar Hero was this weird sort of thing where I've never had a thing where I was like just like when I pick it up I was just good at, except for Guitar Hero. Like pretty much everything else has been like quite a bit of you don't start out good and then work and practice went into it. But like Guitar Hero, I don't know, whatever it is, something about that game I just figured out right away. And also something about that game, the average person finds it pretty challenging. But like again, I don't know where this one came from. I was just pretty dang good at it just from picking it up from the start. And I think at that time it was good enough, and also it was one of those games that kind of latched on to sort of a cultural thing. It was sort of like struck a nerve. And I think if folks who are maybe old enough to remember that may remember or recall, at that time there was like Guitar Hero tournaments, bars were doing like karaoke nights but with Guitar Hero, and there was like competitions and stuff. And so that's kind of like this weird side thing where we made a video when I was in school. I think this was like sophomore year. There was like one of these gaming magazines had like a contest, like a video contest, which is like make a Guitar Hero video. And the winner of it, I still remember the winner of it got like a $200 Guitar Center gift card, was like the big prize. So my friend Brandon, who was someone I met freshman year, who's I did a lot of the YouTube videos with, we were like, yeah, let's do it. So we made this Guitar Hero video, and it was over the top ridiculous. We posted it on my YouTube channel, and it was just me playing the game in a very bombastic and show-offy kind of way in his apartment. and it kind of, it went, we submitted to the contest. They never judged the contest, which is still something that I'm still annoyed at, because like I thought we made a pretty good video for it, but the video kind of kept going and taking off on its own. And as Guitar Hero became more and more popular, so too did the video. And like this, so too did more people like find this video and be like, oh my gosh, there's this ridiculous guy playing Guitar Hero. And I think it was like doing all the showy stuff and being accurate with it was impressive at that
Uh-huh.
time, because I guess it was, yeah, again, it's like a hard game. That's how people consider it. So yeah, so that was like one of the early, and that video just kept on going. I remember there was a day where we were looking at the view count, Brand and I, and we're like, it doesn't slow down. Like it's gonna hit 100,000. I remember we were like kind of watching, being like, it just kind of keeps going. And especially, back then, I think nowadays like 1 million views on YouTube is like not as big of a deal, or not like as a huge thing as it, as it was back then. Um, and so like when it finally, I think it hit 1 million views at some point, we're like, wow, that's pretty weird. But we thought it was like a really interesting thing because we saw certain sort of patterns in terms of engagement, how people were viewing it, how people were sharing it. We realized that a lot of the ways and the reactions that people reacted to stuff and how they choose to express that in form of comments have a sort of, not necessarily predictability, but they all, after a certain point, you basically get every type of comment that you're going to get on the video.
Uh-huh. What were some of the
Yeah.
comments?
I
What
mean, it
were
was stuff like, so it was stuff like, like there was the fun of, like the sort of broad, like this, look at this loser, look at this idiot. And then, there was stuff where it was debates about whether or not it was real or not. And that was a particularly like robust vein of conversation that would kept going to, people kept going to. And then the other side of it too was like, what was interesting is like, was that it had a cyclicality to it, where like people would comment a certain amount of things, and then after a certain point, it would drop off the list of comments, and then a new comment would then show up that was essentially saying something that had already been said, but it felt new. It felt like it was a fresh sort of new thing. So then people would kind of discuss on that, and then they would fall off again. So there was a certain, like understanding that we got by having the sort of front row seat to a video that was popular, and we got to kind of see why it was popular. We got to kind of see like what are the elements and the pieces of it that appear to be, sort of getting people to engage with it, and this is again very very early on. And there was at that time no talk of like, there was no money involved in it. It was just like putting it up, seeing how well it goes, and just for the fun of seeing if we could make something that people would comment on, something that people would react to. And so a lot of our early, sort of online video stuff, it came from this place of starting with the question of like, what are people, what gets someone to stop at a video and like stick with it and maybe leave a comment,
Hmm.
or do something more than just kind of like watch it. And we had this sort of grand theory at the time of like, you want to make videos that are like good party videos, which is, and I think this happens much much less nowadays, but early on there was always a moment in these college parties where it turned into what we called a YouTube party, where like someone brings up a YouTube video and then someone else goes like, "Oh, you think that's funny? Have you seen this?" And they keep
Oh,
switching back and forth.
wow.
And then someone else
Uh-huh.
comes up and it's like, "Oh, that's good. See this one." And then it became almost like it's almost like DJing, like when someone like puts a playlist on
Right.
or something.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it becomes a social thing, because you can't. It costs you social capital if you have like terrible taste in videos, and I'm sure we've all felt this, where it's like someone's showing you a YouTube video and you're like, "This is 8 minutes long. It's
Yeah,
kind of
exactly. Yeah.
boring," and you're like, "Are we gonna watch the whole thing right now?" And it's like, a total like, "Ooh, didn't read the room right." So we were always like, we gotta make videos. When we started the YouTube channel in 2010, we're like, we gotta make videos that win those parties. We want to make videos that like it can work in a loud environment. They're short, they're sweet, they get to a point, and you kind of feel cool for showing your friends. That was like what, weirdly enough, one of the things that was kind of driving kind of what we were making at that time, was sort of that guiding
Sounds like
principle,
the
that guiding
perfect,
thought.
yeah, that sounds like the perfect YouTube mandate. Like it's short, cool, and you can share with your friends. So
Yeah, yeah.
your first MO is make videos that are going to get a reaction, that are going to smile, get a laugh, that sort of thing. Got it.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
next up, or at somewhere along the line there, you blew up a car.
Yeah.
Tell tell us what. By the way, for
Well, we
our
started.
viewers at home, Freddie is in his car.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
James Corden is not in the seat next to him, and he's thankfully not going to start singing karaoke.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, early on, one of the things and one of the reasons why I became friends with Brandon at USC was we were really into, both he and I were both really into action movies and like Hong Kong action movies. And I think The Matrix was a real like formative moment as like a movie that we're like, oh man, that's so cool. And I think that it reflected in both of kind of the work that we both did during high school, which was just, like fun action videos.
Okay,
And a lot of the reasons why, we got into visual effects and sort of the reason for visual effects was, okay, well, we got all these, cool like prop weapons, but we got to make them look like, there's like muzzle flashes and shells coming out of it. Because obviously, my parents and I don't think any parent is gonna hook up their teenage kid with like blank firing weapons. So we had to figure out a way of doing it. We're like, we do it in After Effects, and so that was part of the reason. Big reason why we got into movie stuff was action movies and like the fun of that side of things. It wasn't. I think I wasn't a film school kid that was like really thinking about like, Truffaut and like the French New Wave and like artsy sort of approaches to it. Even though I love all that stuff and I think they're great, just in
right.
terms of my own tastes sort of went more towards like blowing stuff up and having fun with your friends and doing just ridiculous stuff on camera and just trying to make yourself
But
laugh
wait a minute,
with that.
hold on a second. How do you actually get to blow up a car? Like, what were the logistics of you blowing up a car?
The logistics of like blowing up cars is actually not as crazy as you might think, because it really all just comes down to is you just don't want to set anything on fire. That's really the big thing that especially here in Southern California, that's the major primary concern, because you're not really applying an actual, like, you can actually find videos of real explosives blowing stuff up. They're not movie explosions. Movie explosions are big, showier, more flames. But like real explosions are just dusty and dangerous, whereas movie explosions are big and not that dangerous. It's like you can stand like way closer than you think, and just you get a little heat from it, but like there's not like concussive force blowing stuff back, luckily. So I think that we've done our fair share of blowing stuff up. We've done some car flips. We've done some really just fun stunts. And over the course of some of our YouTube videos, over the course of our web series that we did called Video Game High School, and some of the other shows that we've done.
Well,
But
before you fast forward, let me just jump in. Sorry, because I actually have the 5-second film of you blowing up. So let me share that.
oh,
All right, here we go. And so this is a 5-second film of Freddie blowing shit up. Rad dudes, everybody, rad dudes.
yeah, I mean, like that's kind of like the fun of movie making, and I think that's part of the reason why I don't think I'm a super hardcore, like 3D animator, is that part of the fun of making movies is getting outside and just doing stuff and doing stuff in a way that doing stuff that you get to kind of have a little story about. Whereas like you do all kinds of stuff in a computer, but at the end of the day that does mean you're just sitting around at home like clicking buttons on a keyboard and waiting for stuff to render. So having a good mix, I think, is important in my opinion.
All
Of
right.
like stuff that you do for real outside.
So so tell me about the evolution of Video Game High School.
Yeah,
How
so
did
so
it
video game
start? Like, what was the idea? Where did the idea come from? Like, what made you want to do it?
Yeah, so we had we were making YouTube videos at the time. We were getting some momentum around that.
Mhm.
And I think that like one thing that I think is hard to sort of conceive of, especially when you look at early YouTube, is sort of it's hard to conceive of the idea that YouTube isn't necessarily what you want to do. I think now at this point, everybody on YouTube is trying to make it work as a, quote unquote YouTuber, and playing the game of the engagement and the making the videos and the upload schedules and all that. And for us, from the beginning, I got into movies because I wanted to make movies. And there wasn't YouTube, growing up in high school, so didn't have any sort of reference point for that. So we always wanted to do something longer, wanted to tell more of of a lasting story. And this was, we were kicking around ideas, and this was a friend of mine and Will and this guy Chris. They were just coming up with just titles, and they came. I remember at one point they came up with just like, all right, here's and almost as a joke, they were like, video game high school. It's a high school we play video games, and it kind of just like one of those. It was one of those like sort of riffs that kind of stuck around, and we're just kind of like kicking it back and forth. And we're just
Okay.
like, this is fun. And then we were sort of conceiving of it, sort of became this whole thing where we're like, okay, because we saw at the time, we were like, okay, esports it feels like it's a thing that's growing. And it feels like it's a thing that like kids are like really interested in. There's sort of this fantasy element of the idea of like, oh yeah, you could be an athlete in your sport is playing a video game. And we're like, okay, well, if that's, and we also, the other sort of key thing I remember reading at some point was like, oh yeah, if you're a esports player, you are burned out by your early 20s, right? Your prime time is like, 15 to 20 is like when your reflexes are the sharpest. And so the idea that it's like, well, if that's the case, and looking at like soccer academies and, football academies from around the world, they bring in the future, Ronaldo's at like very, very early on because
Mhm.
soccer is such a big deal. We're like, well, what if esports had that same kind of pedigree and that same kind of global importance that something like soccer does? Well, you would probably have academies and schools that would start training kids at the prime, right into the peak of their physical abilities, which would be around high school. So that was kind of where that came from. And I think that at the time our reputation was like making these videos that had like really fun, over the top, visual effects driven like action videos. And I think that a lot of people had expected Video Game High School to to be this sort of like show within the same kind of wheelhouse, and to be the same kind of like ironic, detached, having, poking fun at things kind of thing. And I'm very happy with the direction that we went with it, which was more of an earnest John Hughes, like honest to goodness high school show. Because I think that you can sustain kind of ironic humor and have like fun visual gags for the shorts that we were doing. But I think if you're asking someone to sit down for a while, you have to figure out what kind of story you're going to tell.
So you're telling an overarching narrative, much like a
Yeah.
feature film.
Yeah, so for the first season of Video Game High School, was us thinking about it as essentially a feature film. Like we cut it up into 9 episodes, and each of those episodes were almost like a reel of a movie. And I remember
Hmm.
it was like a big deal at the time because like the ninth episode is I think 22, 25, something like that, 20 some 20 plus some minutes. And then the very first episode, we were like, we have to try and get this as short as possible because we knew that like people were coming into our thing and coming into this series, and like if we didn't have them, if the first episode was super long, like we just felt at the time, we just like, no way, people will click off, they won't care. So it's got to be short, snappy, punchy, and that was like kind of a big sort of overarching thing. And then you could loosen up as the episodes went on, but
Mhm.
the first episode we tried so hard to get it like under 10 minutes. And even at that time, like now, like the average, the default is like 15-minute long videos. But at that time, the idea of doing like a 9-minute episode of like a web series was like, oof, we were a little scared. We're like, oh, I hope people like it. I hope people will watch it. It's really long. It's like 9 minutes long. Now I think people just pull up a 20-minute video and eat a meal to it. But back then it was like a very big deal. And for us, it was a very unexpected thing to get to the last episode. Being like, oh, it's 22 minutes long, and seeing people stick with it was like really interesting. Because again, I think our knowledge at the time was, oh, you gotta make it short, you gotta make it sweet, you gotta, hit your points and then get through it.
Mhm.
And I think that was helpful for that show because
Yeah,
it
it's
kind of
always
forced us
helpful.
to
Yeah.
be efficient. But and I think I think if we were doing it again, we would probably not care so much about that sort of thing, like comparatively. But I think that that's true of any new thing or any sort of new show or whatever you're trying to get into. You have to think a little bit about like, well, who do you want to watch this or find this or enjoy this? And if so, what are all the steps that you're trying to do to kind of make sure that they're getting the best possible experience from it, and that they're hooked on it, and they still want to see where things go. And
Okay.
that
All
comes
right.
in the
So you're,
writing, and that comes with the form too.
you're keeping the viewer in mind. You're keeping, what's the best possible experience for them. Now, I'm not going to ask you how you raised the money for this because I happen to have the video of how you raised the money for it
Yeah,
queued up here. So everybody, this is, and I'm not going to play the whole thing, obviously, but this is Freddie on Kickstarter. This is like an episode of This Is Your Life, isn't it, Freddie?
What's up, guys? Freddie here. Happy New Year. Want to let you know that the Video Game High School Season 2 Kickstarter is now live. Here's your chance to pledge. You can click on the video, you can click in the description, take you directly to it. All the rewards that we're offering on the Kickstarter, as with the first season, are Kickstarter exclusive, which means that they're not.
Okay, so it's kick-ass music.
Yeah, so this was, yeah. Kickstarter was, you know, it's, I think it's funny because there's like these, I feel like there's eras when things kind of come and go throughout online, and like Kickstarter definitely was its sort of own era for a little bit. And the first season, we were like, oh, I think, you know, we had partnered with at the time they were just a management agency. They eventually became more of like an MCN, a multi-channel network in the way that we understand it on YouTube. But at the time, we just partnered with a company called The Collective, was what they were known at the time, and now they're Studio 71 to produce like the first season of Video Game High School. And we're like, oh, I bet we could raise some money for it. And kind of have this sort of dual thing where we get a little money to like make some merch and make some school stuff. You know, at the time we were like, oh yeah, like look at Harry Potter and Harry Potter Land, and look at how much you can get so much out of collegiate or like school based merch. And we're like, oh, it's fun. It's really easy sort of category, especially at USC, which has like, you know, an entire, like the bookstore is just entirely dedicated to just like USC junk, you know, like sweatshirts, hoodies, cats, hats, scarves, whatever, you name it. So Kickstarter was this idea to be like, okay, and you know, I think I acknowledge too that like Kickstarter would not have worked if we didn't have at that time built up like a 4-year, 5-year base, or you know, a little bit less than that, like 3 years of doing YouTube videos. If we were just like coming in clean and nobody knew who we were and nobody had seen our work, like there's no reason for them to pledge to our Kickstarter. So it was an option that was available to us that we could take advantage of because we had enough momentum doing what we normally did, making YouTube videos, and they were you know, sort of getting along, and subscriber base was building. That was sort of a way for us to like, oh, let's see if we can't, you know, throw some crowdfunding into it. So we crowdfunded all 3 seasons, first 2 with Kickstarter, third season with Indiegogo. And yeah, you know, I think that you know, it wasn't the whole budget, but it was a big chunk of the budget that essentially showed up via Kickstarter donations. Those Kickstarter donations were great because, you know, I think that what was nice about them was, you know, we weren't asking people to be like, just out of the goodness of your heart, you know, make this show happen. And I think that's you know, that's absolutely a pitch that can work. For us at the time, we were maybe a little bit insecure about like the idea of someone just supporting us via charity. So we wanted to always make sure that like the rewards were cool. The rewards were things that I would necessarily want. The rewards that felt like there was something like within the universe that they
were kind of rewarding, like, so to speak.
Yeah. And also it wasn't just like, you know, sort of generic t-shirts or whatever. The idea was like, oh yeah, let's remake the school ID cards and give them to people. And like we definitely had like way too many and this is a mistake I think people make on Kickstarters, but like way too many different types of products to ship to people around the world.
I'm not gonna ask you how it went, because again, I'm gonna share the screen and you're gonna find out how it went, everybody. Here you go.
Next guests are award-winning independent filmmakers who broke crowdfunding records with their incredibly popular web series Video Game High School, about a school for elite gamers. Here's a sneak peek at the upcoming final season.
You want to come say that to my face? Oh, no, it's not.
So it really is you, right?
Who's asking?
The #1 player in that game we just sucked at.
You're Sushi Princess?
What happened to you, Matrix? You used to be my hero. You used to be the best. Then Brian gave cooties and sucked up a sentence.
Okay, but that's not fair.
Life ain't fair. Troll pair. Sushi Princess.
Here's one from Freddie.
All right.
Yeah, that's like that. That's like that. I had to buy a suit for that. I still have that. I still have that suit. Yeah, no, I think that, but but I think by the third season, it had really kind of grown to being something that, like, I think even beyond our own, like, I think when it first came out, when Video Game High School first came out, it divided our YouTube audience quite a bit. It was like, I think about an even split, and I think that the sands of time can hide kind of the way things are received, because I think there was a lot of people who in our audience who absolutely hated that show. They thought it was stupid. They thought it was cheesy. They thought it was,
Really?
because it was a step and a departure away from kind of like the, cool, slick action stuff. I think they were expecting that, and they weren't expecting this, kind of cornball show that's trying to tell a high school story. But, I think that, like, weirdly enough, then there was this sort of thing that happened where, sure, a lot of people, I would say about half of our audience at that time just bounced off of it, and they just swore us off. They're like, these guys are idiots. And then as time went on, there was another different audience who really liked the show, and also like the sort of, the funny internet videos that we were making, so that by the time we hit second season and third season, our channel was really divided, because you couldn't make anyone happy anymore, because half the time people would be like, where's more Video Game High School? And then the other half of the time, if it was Video Game High School stuff, it's like, this sucks, I want the other video stuff. So it wasn't really ever making anybody happy. So at a certain point, we were very fortunate that happened, because then it was just a matter of making ourselves happy, because, well, if you can't make everybody happy online, then there's no point. You might as well make yourself happy. So, I think that, like, by the time that second, third season went, I think it's only in the years since that we've had a real sense of how big it was, because when we were making it, it was just us. I mean, I remember what my experience of it was: every night before the episode release, staying up, fixing all the little bugs and stuff, dropping in visual effects, dropping in color correction on it, just really slapped together feeling for us, and then, staying up all night and then uploading it and babying that upload, finally putting it out, and then just falling asleep. Like, we put it out as like 10 in the morning or something, and then just take a nap. And then we just set up for the next episode next week, and then talking to people in the year since, and it's been really interesting hearing for people be like, oh yeah, like, this was like in high school, we would wait in the computer lab because we knew it was coming on, Wednesday mornings or Thursday mornings or Tuesday mornings, whenever our upload schedule was, waiting for that episode so we could watch it. So it was almost like at school appointment viewing for people. And which made it actually feel really bad, because there's definitely a few episodes that we were like, oh, we're too late on the upload, we're going to have to do it later in the afternoon, which means that there were probably very disappointed high school kids somewhere waiting for, hitting refresh on our page and being like, nothing's showing up. Is the episode not coming out today? So we did our best. And we probably would have uploaded stuff earlier if we knew that so many people were waiting for it. But yeah, it grew to a point that was very surprising to us. And even now, I think with the nature of the way online is, it's hard to conceive of what that even looks like, right? What that even means, because also, like, as time has gone on, more people found those videos. They're not watching it, they weren't necessarily there the day it came out, but they may be coming back to it. So yeah, I think that it was a very rewarding experience, but it also gave us a lot of sort of insight and the feeling of like, oh, here's a thing that people are really wanting to see, and it's kind of playing with an audience in that way was very gratifying.
Now, I remember after that, you were going back to making videos that kind of made you happy. And I remember one of them you did for the preview or the release of Cowboys and Aliens with John Favreau.
Yeah.
Now, you stopped in my class at the time at USC and actually showed it when we're going to release this tomorrow. What do you guys think? And the class was went nuts over it, and they were like grabbing at your pant legs. So that was really fun. And then you got to make another one with Key and Peele. Can I show that one?
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure.
All right, let's show Mexican Standoff with Key and Peele, everybody.
Yeah.
And I sure hope that this video plays. So you guys in the comment section, let us know.
Yeah, you got set. Oh, a little chunky. Yeah, there's a zoom setting for like screen share that like changes all the way the handles audio.
I did do that, but hold on, let me do it again.
Probably easier to just Google it.
Optimize for video. Here we go, and try it again. How about now?
Oh, there it is.
Well, boys.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
Looks like we got a Mexican standoff.
Guess again. We've got a sniper trained on your position.
Nice try. But I've had an unmanned drone on that sniper's ass this whole time.
You mean the unmanned drone our hacker just took over?
You mean the hacker whose wife I just kidnapped?
You mean the hacker's wife who just filed for divorce?
Bullshit, that marriage is rock solid.
I guarantee you it's not. I've been hitting that for 6 months. Boom. That's right, cowboy, you hear that? We got you covered, so drop it.
Looks like you got me. But you forgot one thing. I always bring backup.
You mean Chuck E. Cheese over here? I didn't peg for a rat the day he entered the academy. Boom. Second sniper.
Oh, you knew all along?
Yeah.
Well, I knew all along that you knew all along.
Did you just get here, son? I knew you knew I knew all along. All along. All along.
Well, it looks like we've got a real Mexican standoff here, boys.
Whoa! All this talk of double cross is making me hungry. For a slice of blueberry pie.
Special Agent Blueberries Johnson reporting for duty.
You were a sleeper agent?
That's right. And my top secret mission? To investigate you for corruption. Sorry, sir.
Wait, what? You're investigating me? Who do you think you are, Blueberries? And who do you think
I am? I don't know. Why don't you ask?
you?
No! That's impossible!
Look at you two fools, playing your cat and mouse games, when the truth has been in front of your faces the entire time, and behind mine.
Whoa! 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 Whoa!
What happened? What?
You were a gun for a second!
What? No, I'm not a gun. What are you talking about?
Definitely a gun for a second.
I'm not a gun. I'm a human being.
Well, you're crying like a little girl.
Screw you guys, I'm killing everyone! Whoa, stop, all right? Slow down, guys, all right? Listen, let's just take a moment to figure out who's double-crossing themselves while dressed as each other, okay? Does that sound good? Sound good? All right, okay, all right. Okay, so then you became yourself, dressed as me. I get that.
Right, and then this asshole turned into a gun.
Oh, you shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth, you dirty gun.
Guys, Guys, shut up, okay? Can we just agree to go with the plan here? Yeah?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, let's tango.
You love alleyways, don't you?
I won. No. I didn't want to believe it. You can't be. It can't be true. You can't be a gun. You were at my daughter's wedding. You son of a bitch. I trusted you. Fine. But there's something you should know about me. I'm actually a blueberry.
Hell of a crime scene. You're the genius. What's your take?
The way I see it, this young Asian gentleman over here walked into this alleyway, had some blueberry pie, and then killed himself. Then he put the gun way over there to make it look like the gun killed the pie.
Just another wild night in Wizard City.
I think this is very stupid, but like my favorite joke in that video is actually the point of view of the cop. Like I always feel like the thing that I think is the funniest is never the thing that other people think is the funniest, which is like it's the cop pointing at the body and then it comes to camera as if you're about to drink it because it's the point of view, and then cuts to him taking a sip. Like I guess every single time, and I think that is far and away obviously the funniest shot in the whole thing. But you know, that's just my opinion.
Well, no, I mean, the whole thing is hilarious. And let's see, Paul Duke says, oh, who is it? Well, let's see. Oh, Anesh Daya said Mexican standoff is classic. Kept me engaged every second.
That was so that one was like, I think both Key and Peele had seen some of our like YouTube sketches, and they were just trying, like, we were just brainstorming with them, just like, oh, because they had another season of the show that they wanted to promote coming up. So a lot of those videos were like promotion for stuff. A lot of our video game shorts and stuff was like marketing, which is where we got the budgets for it. So that one was one where we had the script that was like this over the top, like, Mexican standoff, but it just keeps escalating kind of thing. But the tough part about it was we never had an ending for it, and endings are always hard. I think especially with sketch comedy, because it's like you want to put a button on it, you want to end strong, and I think that you can see it a lot of, like, I think so the best sketches have great endings, and those are hard to get. I think Key and Peele, by the way, like, I think probably have the best hit rate out of everybody in the history of sketch comedy in terms of having good sketches with good endings. So that was like a promotional thing that we did. And then, like, later on, I show up randomly. There's like an episode of Key and Peele that I was randomly on, as like Asian ghost. So yeah, that's a lot of the origins of a lot of these sort of YouTube videos came from these sort of weird places. Like, we did one with Jimmy Kimmel, and that one was also like just promoting the show a little bit, but what was nice about it was, especially at that time, was nobody knew what YouTube was. Nobody knew what to think about it. And it was simultaneously, everyone knew kind of like, oh, people are watching this, but is it amateur? Is it a professional sort of thing? How much work and effort should go into it? So we got a lot of wherewithal at that time to be able to just do stuff and, like, not have kind of oversight. We just kind of would do our thing and put it together, and people really, I think people liked it. And they let us get away with a lot of stuff without a lot of oversight. So that was a very strange sort of golden era where you could get away with doing a lot of just ridiculous, over the top YouTube videos. And now I think that, like, people are so savvy to it that, like, I think it'd be hard to do like a video like that without, Comedy Central wanting oversight and agents and all that stuff. But sort of at that time, it was this new novel place to get yourself in front of people, and so people were willing to play a little bit like by our rules because it was our domain.
Well, I think the overriding lesson here is that you would go out and make stuff first just to please yourself, and then just to please the audience, and then to please Jon Favreau or Key and Peele. But you always had a story to it. Story was always essential to it, and your stories are like miniature feature films.
Yeah, I mean, we took the craft of what was, even like a dumb YouTube video. I remember the most intense, screaming at each other arguments and discussions were about, like, how should we end this? Is this a good ending? Is this a funny ending? It was like, we took the craft of sketch comedy very seriously. And I think that, like, when I look at those videos and when I look at our YouTube videos, I would say that a lot of that is sketch comedy, but it's not sketch comedy in the way I think we're used to. We're used to this sort of improv, Second City, SNL kind of sketch comedy thing. And, I think maybe, like Lonely Island was maybe an example of that, of work that we were like, oh, this is so cool. This is so funny. And it felt different. It felt like it wasn't cut from the same comedic, like, blueprint that the SNL world came from, right? And I think that when you look at sketch comedy groups, there's a lot of them that sort of have that sort of flavor of, like, SNL or sort of sketch comedy as we understand it. And even Key and Peele comes from that background. But then there's a sort of, what we were doing, what we were trying to do was sort of like, one, explore subject matter that sketch comedy just never touched because it was just so weird and niche and nerdy, right? Like, a lot of the video game stuff, like, for example, SNL doing a video game parody or a real life video game thing is just not going to look anything like how we do it, because their audience is trying to be a little more general, whereas we could afford to do something like a video called Aimbot. And it's like, if you don't know what an aimbot is, which I think like my parents, the average person probably doesn't know what an aimbot is, like, that's an incomprehensible video. So we could afford to kind of get really sort of niche with sort of the things that we thought were really funny, or sort of the strange observations that we had. And it wasn't sort of the framework of sketch comedy, but I think it just looked different. There was more visual effects. We shot it, we treated it like little mini movies, and stuff. And it's stuff that I think, like Key and Peele really did very well on their sketch show,
So to go, I'm gonna fast forward and then come back to something. So just to fast forward for a minute, you are now working on something, not now, but we fast forward a little bit to, I guess, 7 years ago, and here's Rocket Jump. So I'm gonna play a little bit of the trailer of Rocket Jump, and then I want to ask you, like, what was the evolution of this?
Let's do this. Oh my God, you're right. Are you okay?
The goal is to make 8 of the biggest, craziest.
Rocket Jump is going to make the 8 best shorts on the internet.
Wow.
That's what we're doing.
We're fighting with lightsabers. We have exploding violin blasters, UV bombs.
I'm Mashamuja. I'm a producer here at Rocket Jump.
Hey, I'm Ben.
My name is Ashley Birch.
I make sure that nothing gets lit on fire.
Explosions! We don't really have the kind of budgets that a big Hollywood blockbuster has access to.
Something's got to give, because we can't do all this.
I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just worried that we're not going to make it.
This is just a lot that's happening.
So essentially everything has to go off without a hitch for this to work.
Let's get back in there and finish it, yeah?
We're not experts in everything. We're pretty much children. We welcome, and we're really interested in what everybody else brings to the table. The movie doesn't get made by the will of one person alone. The movie gets made by the hands and the hard work and the talent of everybody underneath it.
We have one shot to do absolutely everything.
Action.
I'm gonna f some shit up. You might have to bleep that.
Yeah, so that was yeah, so the history of that was,
about?
yeah, so the history of that was, I think that at the time, yeah, it's always fine because I feel like you have to contextualize the industry around all of those moments too, because that has very strong bearing in terms of why these things like happen. And at the time, it was a question of like, how does, I think Hulu, right? You gotta remember too, it's like Hulu right now, I would say, is a kind of place that like interesting documentary subjects show up on, right? It's like, yeah. And so it's like the reputation of Hulu at that time was a little bit more in the air. And it hadn't quite settled on like what is the thing that Hulu represents. Netflix, I think, was pretty much understood at the time. It was like, oh, this is like House of Cards had just gone through there, I think, more or less. So it's like prestige television, the new definition of what this means. Hulu was still trying to figure it out. So they were willing to kind of take a gamble on something a little stranger, something like, okay, what are these? What's this group of people doing? And we were kind of an interesting blend, and we had pitched them this show, which was the idea was to do the shorts that had kind of like put us on the map, so to speak, but to get into a much deeper behind the scenes around that stuff. And it's funny because I don't think anyone really watched that show, but the people who did watch the show have like a lot of them were the kinds of people that we're trying to reach, which was just, filmmaker types, creative types. And they were like, I think that I've had some, we're very, very, I'm grateful to have had a number of conversations with people who were like, oh, that's like one of my favorite shows because it showed the sort of behind the scenes nitty gritty in a way that you can't find anymore. And then a lot of that stuff was, like, I think a lot of that stuff was even inspired by like DVD special features. That's a weird thing to say, but like, cause like who cares about DVD special features? But like the idea at the time was like, we would watch these movies, and a lot of where our understanding of filmmaking and the sort of the process and what goes into it and what drove a lot of our curiosity early on was the fact that these DVDs would have these behind the scenes special features, and we sit there and we watch them and try to figure out what are they doing in the background of this shot? Like, why are they doing that? And kind of frame by framing those, because we were curious about. The process was something that we were curious about. And the process of filmmaking to me has always been something very interesting and worthwhile.
You kind of put the behind the scenes stuff in front of the scenes.
Yeah, yeah. And
and there was
look, I don't know if that's necessarily a great show idea, but it was the kind of thing that we wanted to see, and it's the kind of thing that I thought was very interesting and insightful. And that was hopefully, something, I think we found a very small niche audience of, sort of filmmaker creative types who have found that show and we're like, oh wow, I learned about this and this and this on it from, so like in that sense, I think it was very much a success. In a viewership sense, it was very much not a success, because there was only one season of that show.
All right, so wait, hold on a minute. So before that, didn't Matt Damon and Ben Affleck have a show about making a movie on HBO?
I think that was after. That was Project Greenlight. I think that was, that was, I think after. Yeah, I think that was a little bit afterwards.
Oh,
yeah,
so
yeah.
they copied you, of course.
I mean, I know they did. No, they had it before, but it was like Project Greenlight was sort of one, it was sort of, because we use it as a reference, as like for pitching. So instead of like Project Greenlight was like one season covered like the short. Whereas for us, we were a little bit more ambitious. We're like, we're going to do each episode is going to be some totally different concept, some totally different thing.
Yeah.
And
so
I think that's
how does Hulu then say, okay, you did that, and now we're going to give you this, and I'm going to show just a 1-minute trailer here or something, and that is this Dimension 404.
It's showtime. This is gonna suck.
Warning, your connection to reality has suddenly quit. Now reconnecting. In the darkest depths of cyberspace, there is a lost dimension, home to wonders unseen, terrors unspeakable, and stories unlike any ever told. Do not click back. Do not reload. You have been reconnected to Dimension 404.
It's like watching Star Wars for the first time.
Good morning.
We need to go back to the moment this all began.
When you drink Impulse 9, you're stretching time.
At Make a Match, we believe there's someone out there for everyone.
I watch out for that thing.
Dimension 404.
All right.
So Dimension 404 was a sort of like sci-fi anthology concept that had been kicking around, and it's sort of like, again, this is getting into now kind of like the nitty-gritty of like kind of the business end of it, which was that one technically was like a license deal that we had done, and that was, we had a first look deal with Lionsgate at the time.
Wow.
And so that was one of those ones where we had, and here's sort of the circumstances that sort of where that ended up, which was at the time we were like, we got to hang on to the rights. We can't do it as original. We want this to be our show. And so then it was actually kind of a licensed show, so that, it showed up in different territories. Hulu was the North American license for that one.
Oh, wow.
And what was wild about that was that I think that ended up being, in retrospect, a mistake, because what happened was that during that 2-year period, every streamer realized they needed to own their own shows. Like Hulu realized they needed to do originals. Netflix, like the licensing fees for like stuff around Netflix dropped, because they all realized that the value in having a streaming network is the library that it commands. And then if you don't own the library, you don't really have anything. So then as a result, when it came time to promote the show, they're like, well, this is a licensed show. This isn't our show. So they didn't really care so much about it. And so it was one of those things where we realized, like, as the ground shifted underneath us, and as these streamers realized, they're like, oh, they're not, if they had a choice between, spending ad dollars on a show that they're licensing from a third party that's going to disappear off their platform after a certain point, or, one of their originals that they own outright, they're gonna promote their original because that's their thing, right? And that was one of those like, those lessons about like, oh, you can think, I think that we had stuck too strongly to the principle of like, yeah, owning your show is important. It's like, well, is it so important nowadays, or does it really not matter after a certain point, So yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was, taking kind of the anthology format, doing these sci-fi scripts and working with a bunch of people, and having a range of directors on board for it. But yeah, that was another fun experience on that front. But it was also one that I think was, to me, the key takeaways of that was, sort of more about the nature of the film industry and the TV industry, and how those things have
Mhm.
been shifting over the course of the past, decade, to, strong degrees in a lot of different directions. And so for us now, it's like, okay, cool, let's work on a feature film that we can go with, because television was a lot of fun, but also television is very expensive, and the more expensive it is, the more, you need to talk to someone and ask their permission to pay for it, and get money from elsewhere.
So, okay, so to fast forward again, you go from that to then now a career in podcasting that you said actually helped finance your feature film. So
Yeah, so this is now, we're getting around now to sort of contemporaneous times. We're looking for other projects. One of the things that was always interesting to me, in terms of being sort of a new media kind of nerd, was seeing kind of how podcasts, but specifically a niche of podcasts. Because again, podcasts I remember what after coming out of college, being like, oh, everyone's like, podcasts can be the next big thing. There was this sort of like interesting thread of specifically Dungeons and Dragons podcast, because at this point, everyone knew Critical Role, but like the Adventure Zone that the McElroy brothers have done, and McElroy family really were examples of these shows that I'd listened to and like really got into, and I was like, it's really something really interesting here, because it felt like improv, but it was structured. It was structured in a way I hadn't seen before, and I was like, I think that this framework allows you to tell a really compelling, interesting story. So for us, for our show now, Dungeons and Daddies, which is not BDSM podcast, a Dungeons and Dragons podcast about like dads, like fatherhood, and the idea of like, kids being, yanked away and getting sent into the realm, the sort of fantasy realm. There was something there that was really fun and interesting, and so for that, I was like, okay, this is a few years ago now. We're like, all right, let's just give this a shot. Let's try doing some improv and trying to doing a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, and that one has found, sort of this foothold, and this subgenre of podcasts, of narrative podcasts that are sort of half improv, half comedy, half gameplay, really has found a sort of niche amongst that crowd of people who got really into it. And I think we're now on our second season, and that's kind of like been the main creative project at the moment. And then that helped fund a feature film that Matt and I wrote during the pandemic.
That's what I was going to ask you about, because you've now done pretty much every art form except possibly ballet. So you're now on to feature films, and I want to hear about your feature film, like the genesis of that idea.
Yeah, so we shot this road trip film, sort of sci-fi road trip film, because we were so tired of sticking around. Everyone was getting stir crazy during the pandemic, and it came from this observation that we're like, what's going to happen in this pandemic is that eventually it'll end. And eventually productions will get back to where they were. But every single person who's ever won any award or had a successful project is going to be lined up through the door at all these streamers trying to get their projects through. Like, we're not going to be at the front of that line. Like, we're not at the tip top back of that line, but we're also nowhere near the front of that line. I mean? We ain't got no golden statues to walk us in with. So we're like, well, shit. I guess that means if we want to do a movie, we got to just figure out how to do a movie ourselves, because there's no way someone's going to give us money for it, when, especially after this pandemic is done, everyone else who's going to be way, with their hand out, way more pedigree than us getting that stuff funded. So it sort of coincided in that we're like, we could probably, again, this is a low budget movie. This is a low budget indie, but like, we could funnel some of what Matt and I were making on the podcast. Let's put this into a movie, because also it came from the observation of realizing that, like, even TV, I think there was even a time when like TV direction was a way that you could get, work and experience. But then at this point, they're like, yeah, what are you talking about? Oscar winners are directing TV. TV is the hip, cool thing to get in on. So no feature film to our name, no real, TV experience, but it's like way so far back that almost feels irrelevant, because you gotta be you're only as successful as your latest, successful project. So that's what we did. We wrote this indie road trip feature, sort of a sci-fi comedy road trip feature, set in the kind of weird America where like the world is changed by like this bizarre alien object that shows up and just doesn't seem to do anything. It just shows up and just freaks everyone out. And it's about sort of two people who connect, and they get their lives kind of upended by something that this alien object does, and it's very mundane. Like they just have to go get their stuff back so that they can, continue living their lives. But yeah, sort of a sci-fi road trip, existential comedy, and is also infused with a lot of the stories that we had doing road trips. Matt and I had doing road trips because Matt has this fear of flying. So I've spent a lot of time and a lot of miles on the road with him. So we kind of collected some of these weird stories that we've had and kind of put them together, strung together, very loose kind of narrative. Just wanted to be experimental. Just wanted to kind of try, a feature film, kind of using some of our experience that we've had, And I think we're in the post-production phases right now. That's why I'm in my car acting about that. I got run to ADR section after this, but we're in the sort of finalized phases, and we're gonna go sort of the direction that you do with a lot of the feature films, which is give it a shot, see if festivals will take it, see if you can get it sold, and barring that, put it online, because at the end of the day, we don't know anybody for it. It was our own money funding it, so might as well see where it goes. But yeah, that's the film. It's called We're All Gonna Die. So it's very,
We're all gonna die.
Very, yeah, it's all very tied in, the mood perhaps during the pandemic, but it's a comedy. It's a feel good. It feels. I think it's a hopeful movie at the end of the day, despite what the title may imply.
So maybe you should do like a partner video with Mark Mayron.
Yeah.
It's kind of his theme.
Yeah.
So where will we? So
no idea. We're about to go. We're about to fish it up. We're gonna throw it to festivals. I don't know. At the end of the day, for all of our stuff, we always like it when people see it. So if we had a choice between making no money but a lot of people see it, and making a bunch of money but nobody sees it, we'll take a lot of people seeing it over that every single time. So that's the goal of it. We just want to get it out there, and then we're already thinking about what our next feature film is. We're already talking about how we might put that together. But that's always been, I think, the pattern. It's always we have a thing that we think is interesting, and then we kind of try and get everything set up around it to make it work.
So should we be, hovering over our keyboards on the Rocket Jump YouTube channel, waiting for the demo of it, or
I have no idea at this point. No, I think we'll see. I think the world is so wild and crazy and different now. Like, to me, I think it makes more sense to promote something like that on TikTok over YouTube.
Man.
I think that your process in terms of promoting it and getting it out is different than a trailer. I think that, I'm starting to see how bands sort of promote on it. I see how on TikTok, I see how, TV shows go. It's the kind of thing where I think that you do yourself a disservice by going straight to the same methodologies that are default for things. I think a lot of people think of a trailer, like, oh yeah, throw a trailer out, and then that's how you do it. Like, I don't think anybody's seeking a trailer anymore. I don't think anybody, if it's not some hot name actor or director that you're interested in, you're not going to find that, and I think that you're only going to, for us, our goals are always find, try and hit our audience that already likes our stuff, but also keep trying and look for a new audience as well, because, there's always new people out there who might like what you're doing, and you do yourself a disservice by only focusing on the people who are already fans of you. So yeah, I think honestly you're probably gonna find, hopefully if I play my cards right, you'll see clips of it, and you'll see like stuff about it on TikTok more than you'll see it on like a YouTube trailer. So that's the thinking right now. But that stuff always changes. It's always gonna depend on what the tenure of the moment is.
So the two last questions that I'm getting from the audience here. One person asked, is there a way to get 1 million subscribers in 30 days that doesn't involve bots?
I mean, yes, I think so, but it requires you to have an idea or have a concept that is so sticky that all those people show up for it, right? Like, I think, again, I might be a little dated on this, but like, I think that like the hydraulic press channels had that kind of crazy explosive growth. But that stuff also played out pretty quick too, so I think it depends. And I think that the approach of trying to get like a bunch of subscribers to something is a very easy metric that is a good sign of success. But I don't think that metric necessarily gives you any help with regards to what you actually want to be doing. Because if your goal is just make a bunch of subscribers for something, yeah, there's probably a bunch of ways you could do that. You could spin up a bunch of you spin up a whole bunch of different channels on TikTok that is just algorithmically pairing, Family Guy clips with like mobile game videos. Just like, there's like tons of these little hacky things to do it, which is, by the way, if that's something that you find like artistically interesting and compelling, then all power to you, go for it. But I don't think that most people find that stuff artistically interesting. I think that's a real balancing act for anybody who's thinking about doing online video or anything in these sort of social media spaces, is that there are answers towards how you can just get a bunch of subscribers. And I think some platforms are harder than others. I think Twitch might be the hardest platform to do that on right now, because it's so saturated and you're fighting against very established people for the same time slots. It's very, very much feels like old school network television in that way.
Wow.
But if you want to promote your music and you're in a band or you play music and you want to promote that, I think that you look around and you say like, well, TikTok seems to be the place that you can do it. But I think it's also important that you don't lose track of what you actually care about artistically, because if your goal is just views and subscribers and metrics as much as possible, I think I think you can achieve that, but I don't know if you'll be very happy or satisfied, and I don't know if you'll keep that up just with hitting those numbers.
All right.
At least the people that I've seen, like they generally tend to find a thing, and they start from a different place, which is, I want to do a thing, and this thing drives me and compels me to do it. And I would do it even if I wasn't getting any money, and even if I wasn't making tons of views on it. And I think that that's where you have to start if you want to have any sort of sustainability. If you want to just get flash in the pan, get a bunch of views and stuff, then there's plenty of ways of doing it. But I don't think it's very interesting.
All right, last question then. Are you happy?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the key with the way I look at things is I've summed it up as happy but not satisfied. I'm very happy with all the stuff that we've done, but I also look at everything I've done and I also think like, here's how we'll do it different next time. Here's how we'll do it better next time. And I think that that's kind of just the guiding ethos for the stuff that I do. Yeah.
Well, you keep switching media, so
yeah, I guess so.
You have to do the same thing twice in order to do it next time, I guess. Yeah,
that's true.
Well, cool, Freddie. This has been absolutely fantastic. You've answered the questions that have come in just in your own speaking, so apparently you're clairvoyant.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. So put that on your resume. Yeah. And I would say to the audience, any last questions, but you've exhausted them all. And is there any final words you would give to, aspiring filmmakers, aspiring YouTubers, TikTok?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly it's like, make it about the work and ask yourself what you actually want to do. Because I think if you get too, I think but you have to balance it, because I think that there's also there's no creativity that has some sort of monetarily sustainable sort of side of it. And so that, I mean, like, if you like to play music and you don't care about making money and recording albums and getting Spotify views, then do it. That's fantastic. If you care about that side of it, you care about building an audience, you care about making money on it, that's the challenge, I think, is balancing that desire and making sure that you're not too far in either direction. You're not so far in the thought of like, I have to be this, perfect artist and express myself. And on the other side, you don't want to be like, I have to be this populist and I have to make sure as many people see it as possible. I think that the answer, at least for me, has always lied somewhere in between. And that's, I think, true for all art throughout all of time, right? Like, you can sit and you can look at, like, you can idolize, like, Da Vinci, right? Or any of these sort of classics artists, but he's like, yeah, but they played a different game. They were trying to figure out who their patrons were. And that you don't think that the patronage process in Renaissance Italy didn't involve networking and going to parties and trying to get your reputation out there? At the end of the day, one can look at Da Vinci's workshop and be like, Da Vinci was more of a CEO than he was necessarily this pure perfect artist. Like, half the time they're working on a commission, they're like, well, shoot, they want a bunch of tiles and they want a bunch of wrought iron for these gates. All right, well, who am I going to get to do that? It becomes more business-like than I think a lot of us give credit for. So I think the thought of, like, attracting an audience and getting paid and getting that sort of making a living off of doing your work has always been a part of art, in the sense that we look at it, and even some of the stuff that we even consider like quote unquote pure art But if you want to just like make stuff, that's totally great. I think that's awesome. There's so many tools available for you now. But I think that at least for me, I also like the idea of I want to do this for my full-time gig. So that being the case, at least from my perspective, I think you also have to think about audience building and all that sort of things and how to attract an audience on top of the usual, like, well, but is this interesting to me as an artist? Is this something that's fulfilling to me? Is this something that I can feel like I can sustain? So
Freddie
yeah.
Wong, that is so amazing. I'm honored that you took the time to do this.
Yes,
And
thanks for having me.
everybody out there is really, really psyched about this. I see there's like sirens passing you now, which is the perfect way to end this.
Yeah.
What better way to
I
end
gotta
a
get to
Freddie
the city.
Wong?
Yeah, I better get going.
All right,
Fun,
well,
caught
before the
up.
gunshots begin, I'm going to let you go.
Yes,
And
indeed.
so thank you so much.
much.
And I hope to speak to you again soon. Take care.
Thanks so much.
All right. And for our viewers at home, we will be at the Student Television Network events in Long Beach on March 17th and 18th. That's the Long Beach Convention Center, California. It's March 17th and 18th all day if you want to come meet anybody from the virtual film school team. Next week, we are going to have Nikki Baber. And Freddie sure does have a lot of views on YouTube, but Nikki Baber's got a heck of a lot more on TikTok. Freddie was saying TikTok was the place to be. So Nikki Baber is going to be on next week, and she is then going to be joining us as our special guest at the Student Television Network convention, Long Beach, March 17th and 18th, all day long. So hope to see you there, meet you all in person. Until then, have a fantastic week. Thank you, James Race, for producing this, Ian Gourmet, Lynn Spire, and the whole virtual film school team. You guys are awesome. Take care.